What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome to another miniature rescue. This week, we're going to be rescuing 69 little Ork Gretchin that I got off of eBay for 20 bucks. I'm definitely a fan of orks. I mean, if you can't tell. I've got the big guys, the metal cans, the big dumb orks that make everyone smile, but there's always been something missing. The little guys. Ork Gretchin have been around for quite some time, and because they came in abundance in the second edition Warhammer 40,000 starter box all the way back in 1993, there are a ton of them floating around. I imagine quite a few people who've been around 40k for even a short amount of time have seen these guys. While they are monopose and quite goofy, they are some of the best models to use for testing colors and practicing the basics of painting, and especially batch painting. A few months ago I was scrolling through eBay just minding my own business when suddenly the perfect listing popped up. 69 second edition Ork Gretchin for $20. Now, I don't know about you, but myself, being the kind of person I am, I hit that buy it now button the absolute instant that page loaded and would allow. I barely looked at the pictures because at the end of the day, 69 Ork minis for 20 bucks is just too good to pass up in pretty much any condition. Now, I did ask the seller about them just to see what the deal was, and the response I got was pretty straightforward. They were picked up around 2nd edition and have been sitting in a drawer taking up space ever since they came out. A few of the minis had paint on them, but the seller just never got around to finishing them up and getting them on the table. Funny side story as well. After the seller sent the package, I got a follow-up message asking for me to look inside the box when it arrived to see if his wife's purse had accidentally just been mailed in it. I guess she'd lost it, and last thing she did was seal up the box and ship it out before realizing her purse was gone. Now, it wasn't in there, and I do hope that she found her purse. But that was one of the more lively eBay interactions I've had in a while, and I thought it was worth a mention. Anyway, I got the Gretchin, and the first thing I did was dump them into a pickle jar filled with LA's Totally Awesome. I had no immediate plans for the models, so they've been patiently soaking so I could scrub the old paint away when I got to them. Having models like this soaking in a jar is a great way to take care of paint on used models. It's low cost, and you get some pickles sometimes. It's something that can be sealed away and set in the corner of your hobby space. It's also kind of appealing from a sort of weird science floating things in a jar standpoint. They just look cool in a weird jar. Whenever you get a model that needs to be stripped, if you don't have a sonic cleaner or any other quick way of removing paint, it's easy enough to just open the jar and throw your models in for a couple of days to get that paint off. It's probably the cheapest option too. Now that I have them though, the time feels right to get them out. What exactly should I do with them? Well, I think the best approach is to build an army, like a 100% Gretchin themed Ork army with vehicles and cans and just a big mass of 69 monopose 2nd edition models. And the idea I had was to paint them all just a little different, and that way we could get a really good horde of different colors and kind of have a unique army. And while it won't win any games, it will be ridiculous. First things first. Let's get these minis cleaned up, take care of the mold lines, and get them primed and ready to paint. But before that, I do want to tell you about my chair. FlexiSpot was kind enough to send over their C7 Ergonomic chair, and I've been using it for about a month now. The chair has a ton of features, and a lot of them, while being talked about for 9 to 5 job applications, clearly translates into the miniature painting experience. Here's some notable things that I've kind of figured out since I've been using it. Well, my old chair was actually making it hard to go for long stretches of painting, batch painting, or even just trying to relax. Just wasn't doing me any favors. The C7, on the other hand, feels good when I sit down. And it's weird because I realized that I stopped thinking about being in the chair as soon as I got to work. Whereas with my old busted one, I was constantly trying to adjust and get into a better painting position, but not really realizing that I was doing it so often. Partially that's due to the material it's made of, but also the back support that adjusts with your movement to keep you sitting properly and in an ergonomic position. I could feel it holding me in the right spot, and I've been able to just sit back and relax in it. Especially when painting for long sessions during this video, 69 models all at once, I didn't have to take breaks nearly as often to stretch or walk around. The armrests in particular have been good. They can move up and down and in and out and swivel. So finding the proper height and placement for my elbows really helped me lock down on the models. I wasn't trying to fight my chair to get into the proper position to paint things like eyes. You really got to get in there. And it's something we don't really think about too often when we paint, like what we're sitting in. A chair is not the first thing we think of when upgrading our hobby space either. It's probably one of the last things we actually think about, but being comfortable and able to steady yourself really helps when you're trying to get a lot done. I mean, this thing even has a footrest, so if you're the kind of person who likes to sit back and paint, with your feet up and your elbows in a good position, this chair is actually a very fantastic option for that. This is definitely an upgrade from my old chair. And even better is FlexiSpot's 30-day return policy that is paired with a 15-year warranty. So you can try it out for yourself and know that you're going to be covered in the short term and the very long term.
Check out the link in the description or the pinned comment below and use my code C730 to get $30 off of the purchase of $400 or more.
Thank you again, FlexiSpot, for sending over the C7. Now let's get back to those grots. These minis have been in this pickle jar for just about 2 months. For the most part, there wasn't a ton of paint on them. A few had been painted, and the rest of them had a coat of primer and who knows what kind of, dust from being stowed away in a desk drawer for the last 30 years or so. They could be slightly newer than that, but the previous owner did mention that he got them when they came out, and that was 30 years and some change. So yeah, they've been locked up for a minute. The pickle jar was surprisingly hard to get open. Probably the soap drying in the seal, but a little bit of tapping and the top finally popped off, revealing fresh minis inside. I'm always surprised by how well LA's Totally Awesome could just cut through and get rid of paint on old models, even sitting and just being stirred up once a week or so. The primer that was on these guys just melted off and settled at the bottom, and what paint was left came off without almost any effort. If you have time to wait, this is by far the cheapest and easiest way to go to get paint off of a model. And while I'm at it, let's go ahead and throw some old Bretonnians and Orks into the jar for another video later on. After getting the soap cleaned off the models, I came in with an X-Acto knife to remove the mold lines. Older models like this are easy to clean up, mostly because the mold lines are always in the same place and the plastic is easy to scrape down. The only real issue with that is on this scale, it's rather time consuming. So put on a book and went to work. Because all of these guys are the same monopose, it was pretty mindless to sit and scrape mold lines away. The mess was pretty nuts though. There were just little bits of plastic everywhere. Out of all 69 of these minis, I did find 4 that need more work. One of them just had a broken base, and that's easy enough to take care of with a replacement. But the other 3 were missing the spikes on their helmets. So I grabbed out the Greenstuff, and I'm going to do my best to sculpt them some new ones. Luckily, it's not the most complicated shape in the world, so I'm hoping they really won't be noticeable. And with a group of models like this, there are a lot of things that get hidden away in the numbers. I didn't even realize that these were broken until I actually went and cleaned the mold lines. I just realized, oh, there's missing pieces. Something to keep in mind when army painting. You can get away with a lot if the group of models is large enough. From a painting point of view and modeling, it's the whole army that creates a look, not the individual models in it. So spend your time on the fun stuff and the big stuff, and get the little guys painted well enough that they look good together. It's kind of a counterintuitive way to think about an army project, but it's also something that will help you finish the project and not get bogged down on the chaff units. I'm going to set the green stuff aside to dry before getting primer down, but the rest of the models get taped down to a box and they can be prepped for painting. Speaking of painting, there are a few things that I want to do with these guys. My first thought was to paint every single one of them differently, and in some ways I want to stick to that idea, but honestly that would just take too long. I want the skin to be vibrant and bright, and then change up the leather and guns on the minis. With the skin being painted the same, they will have the same look across the unit, but variations in color for the cloth and the guns will help keep them fun and stand out individually, even in small 5 or 10 man little units. There's also the prospect of doing freehand on each model, also time consuming. Each one could get either checkers or stripes or something that make them look more like a unit or large group. The idea is that even though these are all monopose minis, they will all look a little different from each other while hopefully maintaining a cohesive unit look. At least that's the idea I'm shooting for. Before jumping into the paint though, I wanted to take a look at how other people have painted these. They've been around for quite a long time and there are a ton of awesome examples to look at. I really like that some of these have those little bits of freehand, and they all look good with a variety of colors on them. Specifically, the gun casings being painted without metallic paint feels like the way to go. And the bold colors make these models feel old in a good way and take me right back to the old days of 40K. So bright colors, freehand, and variety, that seems doable. The first thing I want to take care of is my example model. I need a standard to shoot for and something that can be pretty easily replicated. So I started to paint a few just to get a baseline for all 69 of them. For the most part, I will try and keep things simple, and that's pretty important up front. Doing all the extra steps with highlighting and layering takes up quite a lot of time. So when you batch out a ton of models, you need to keep in mind that the group is going to stand out just because of how big it is, not necessarily how each one of them is painted. You won't even notice, really. The test model I filmed in one sitting so I could get that number and then decide where I can cut corners. The biggest thing, like I mentioned, was the highlighting, but I also found that the skin was taking up more time than was really needed, so I want to try and cut down on a lot of that. Once the test models are done, I know I can paint a couple in 45 minutes to a pretty good standard, but to complete them, I will still need to cut out steps. I don't want these to take 30 plus hours to get them all knocked out. After coming up with a plan, it's much easier to set small goals for painting. I know there are plenty of people out there who struggle painting large batches, and the thing that helps me the most is having a stopping point for each step. That way I could spend, an hour or so doing one thing and feel accomplished by the end of it. For example, I painted all of the skin on each model and then I took a break. Then I painted all of the leather and took a break, and so on. When you look at how many steps there are to base coat these, it breaks down into just a few hours of work to get them all looking pretty nice. But still, there are a lot. So pop on an audiobook or a movie you've seen a million times and just let the paint flow. Fun fact as well, I am using the absolute greatest green of all time to do the base coating for the skin and the bases. Goblin green, even being as old as it is, has great coverage and hits that nostalgia button right on the head. Moving on to some of the more bold decisions, I picked out 2 color combinations for the cloth and guns. That way I know exactly which 2 colors to grab and where they go. Keeping everything organized and knowing what colors to use really speeds up that process. After the base coats go down, I will come in with some Army Painter Strong Tone and coat all over. Strong Tone is so great and does a fantastic job at sitting basically where you put it on the model. And it's not quite as strong as Speed Paint or Contrast, but it has similar qualities in that it just sits in the recesses and kind of stays there. So a healthy helping of that on all the models, and we can kind of move on to touch-ups. The bases all got a first coat of Goblin Green, but there are a bunch that need a second coat and some areas that will need to be covered up where I overspilled some paint or wash. Batch painting and army painting in particular are about getting a good, consistent result over a large number of models. If there are messy bases, the unified effect gets lost, and the block of models still kind of looks messy. But as soon as they become more uniform, everything looks a little cleaner and a little nicer. Something else to remember is that you don't have to paint your armies to the absolute highest standard. Of course, it's more fun to spend time on the centerpiece models or things you just like. But when it comes to large blocks of infantry, those models won't even be on the table long enough to really make a difference. You're just not going to see them for very long. The overwhelming block of unified, decently painted models is what makes it impressive. So try and paint as clean as you can, but don't get too fancy or you won't actually finish that army. I know there are some people that need to hear this, is why I'm saying it. I had a lot of fun with these models, and it's not every day that you run into 69 models of any kind for 20 bucks. And I knew as soon as I saw that I was going to have to jump in and just paint them all at once. This never really felt like take it at a slow pace project, and I just wanted to see the massive block all painted up. These are iconic minis, and I think any hobbyist who's been even in close proximity to Warhammer in any way probably have one of these in their bits box somewhere. In fact, I'm pretty sure I have a handful somewhere, and I can probably make 80 models out of this in the near future, just to see that, because that sounds cool. Anyways, thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And of course, here are the 69 second edition Ork Gretchin. Thanks again.